my lovely little gemstones, it's Saphira, and today I'm going to be reading A Game of Vice, Chapter 2, written by Coconut Cluster. Chapter 2, Itsy Bitsy Spider. You'd think, after years of decorating his bedroom with cobwebs and blackout curtains, that Virgil would be used to dark, spooky places. That was, apparently, not the case. Admittedly, the general eeriness of his room didn't exactly come with random noises in every direction, or weird shadows in the corner of his eye. If those even were shadows. He didn't particularly want to consider alternative possibilities, so he at least got some credit there. There was also no looming threat of someone he cared about being locked in a tower indefinitely when he was just listening to music in his bed. That was a pretty big contrast to his current situation. He really needed a nap. Or Valium. Virgil, if you're so insistent on being in the lead, could you please make an effort to outrun a snail? What he really didn't need was a certain snake-faced nuisance trailing behind him and driving him to consider homicide. Would you rather we just sprint to our demise? He snapped, glancing over his shoulder to glare at Deceit, who just raised an eyebrow and rolled his eyes. And can you hold the attitude for 10 minutes? It's not exactly helpful at this moment. Or ever. Oh, I have an attitude. I'm sorry, Deceit said as he placed a hand to his heart, an expression of feigned apology plastered onto his face. Virgil had half a mind to deck him right then and there, though he usually had the urge to do that. I'll try to keep that in check as soon as you stop brooding and slowing us down with your existential angst. Virgil stopped in his tracks and spun to face him, hands curled into fists at his sides. I have exactly 0 qualms about punching you in the face right now, Deceit. Qualms, Deceit repeated and raised his eyebrows, offering a small, overly polite clap. That's an impressive vocabulary choice for you, Virgil. I'm quite proud. Okay, Patton cut in. Virgil had almost forgotten he and Logan were a few feet behind them, as he gently tugged Deceit away from his and Virgil's staring match. That's the 4th time you guys have almost gotten a little too rowdy, and we've only been walking for half an hour. Let's take a little break from that, alrighty? We'll just walk quietly for a little bit. How's that sound? Deceit shrugged off Patton's hands and straightened his cloak, nose in the air, looking down at Virgil. Why did he get to be a few inches taller? No, I don't think we should. The mediating smile on Patton's face melted away into a small frown, but he just took a step back, inching closer to Virgil instead. Logan stepped forward from where he'd been watching and silently reclaimed his spot next to the moral side. Virgil clearly has something he'd like to discuss, Deceit continued, eyebrows still raised. So why spend the rest of the trip in tension when we could just clear it up right now? Isn't that right, Virgil? Do not commit homicide. Do not commit homicide. Patton would be disappointed in you. Virgil started through gritted teeth. There's not much to clear up. You're a two-faced traitor, and we all know it. Traitor? Deceit repeated carefully, pointedly. Don't. Virgil pretended not to notice the look Patton and Logan shared, just kept his eyes on a smirking Deceit and counted off on his fingers. 2, there isn't an option to just get rid of tension. I don't like you, and that's not changing anytime soon. And 3, this is not a trip. Roman's in trouble, and we have no idea if he's okay right now, and you're only here helping us because of some petty power struggle with Remus. Deceit's smarmy expression faltered. Some of us actually care about getting Ro back safely, so if you're just gonna be an obnoxious prick while we do that, you're more than free to go back to the mindscape and congratulate yourself on yet another day of inconveniencing us. He dropped his hand, curling his fingers into his palm so hard his nails bit into the skin. Job well done, Deceit. The forest felt deathly quiet as he finished, and it was only then realized how shallow his breathing had become. The severity of the situation hit him fully there, standing in the middle of an unknown landscape with an enemy watching from somewhere around them, and another beside them under a thin mask of an alliance. They knew next to nothing about where they were, how to navigate Remus's twisted forest, and whatever creatures or monstrosities came with it, how to find their way to the tower ahead, to save Roman before something forced him into harm's way, assuming he wasn't already. For all Virgil knew, this was all some pointless goose chase Remus had orchestrated just to mess with them, and Roman was already— No, Virgil accosted, swallowing past the lump in his throat. Not here, not now. He refused to let Remus influence him, even here, surrounded by blackened, twisted trees that dripped with shadows and uncertainty. They were going to get to the tower, they were going to save Roman, and then everything would be fine because he refused to believe otherwise. All he had to focus on was getting back that overdramatic scoff and stupid prince uniform and sparkly eyes and charming crooked smile, and maybe that wasn't the best path to go down right now either. He shook his head to clear it, refocusing on the scene before him. Patton and Logan had matching looks of concern on their faces. but Deceit just stared at him, mouth a taut line and eyes unreadable. Virgil fought the urge to take a step back and raised his head instead. False bravado was still bravado, after all. My intentions are hardly to inconvenience you all. My intentions are hardly to inconvenience you all, the snake-faced side started in a low voice. But when my suggestions are overlooked simply because of my role, exclusively because of my role, I have no other choice but to make my input known in more drastic ways. If being a force you can't ignore is the only way for me to fulfill my purpose, then so be it. He sent a glance to Patton, brief and deliberate, and met only with something indecipherable, before turning back and leveling his gaze at the anxious side before him. I understand your vendetta against me, Virgil. I do. And I'd be lying if I said it wasn't the slightest bit mutual. But believe me, ironic a request as it might seem, when I say my actions stand separate from our relationship. Everything I do for Thomas. His shoulders shifted with an unsteady breath, as if he were bracing himself, eyes flickering behind Virgil's head to the tower looming against a black sky in the distance. When he met Virgil's gaze once more, there was an unmistakable glint of determination in his mismatched eyes. And Thomas needs Roman. So I'm here to help you, he continued in the shocked silence, straightening his spine once more. I'm here to help Roman. No strings attached, no ulterior motive. We don't have to get along, per se. But if we can abide by a truce until we finish Remus's little game, we'll be out of here and back to our lovely, begrudging selves much sooner. What do you say? He stuck a hand out. His lemon-yellow gloves were gone, replaced just like the rest of his outfit, just as Virgil's had been. He sorely missed his hoodie, but he'd been more than relieved to see metal plates on his chest and forearms over a layer of chainmail. Whatever happened in the forest, he'd at least have some protection. Not to mention the purple fabric draped over his shoulders wasn't exactly detestable. It was a dark leather glove that Virgil stared at now, unfamiliar and, by that nature, unencumbered by disquieting memories. He reached out and shook it. A truce, he repeated quietly, pulling his arm back and meeting Deceit's eyes with a nod. For Roman. For Roman. It wasn't a seamless peace treaty, but if it meant Virgil could worry about one less villain on this godforsaken quest, then he'd take whatever he could get. Well, isn't this just touching? Oh, for God's sake. Remus, Deceit greeted dryly, not shifting his gaze to where the Duke was perched on a tree bench ahead, legs crossed and head tilted as he surveyed the scene with a sickly sweet smile. Back so soon? You know it, Remus beamed. You all just seemed so bored. I thought I'd liven things up a little. As the person who initiated this game, Remus, interrupting it is an odd choice, Logan commented. He'd been remarkably quiet during their journey so far. So quiet that Virgil wondered now what he'd been doing up until this point. Though he wasn't complaining once he saw the look Logan got in reply. Remus's gaze snapped to the logical side, his eyes flickering into an annoyed pucker. I'm hardly interrupting, Logan, he said, drawing out each syllable of the name. And if you hadn't interrupted me, then you'd know that I'm here to deliver a challenge, which is part of my game. Logan squinted. I still know that now. You just told us. Deceit covered his snicker with a cough as Remus took in a deep, slow breath, lips pressed tightly together and eyes wide. Right, the Duke said through a clenched jaw. Moving right along. A challenge? Letting you all mosey along, right up to my dear brother, would take all the fun out of this whole thing, don't you think? He didn't wait for their responses before he nodded enthusiastically, eyes closed in agreement with himself. It would, it really would, and I am not about to let boredom ruin what I worked so hard on for you guys. You mentioned it once and sank out, Deceit deadpanned. So I've returned, Remus continued as if he hadn't spoken, throwing his arms up with a cheer. And I will return again, assuming you can best my challenge this time, to give you all a chance to beat your own little fairy tale monster. Isn't that fun? He fixed them each with an all-too-cheery smile. Let's not delay any longer. I'm simply bursting with excitement. With a flourish of his hand, the tree branches ahead of them started to twist and stretch, forming a woven wall of black, gnarled bark to block their path. Virgil took a step back, glancing to Logan and Patton instinctively. Patton had latched onto Logan's arm as the logical side eyed the wall, scanning the branches as if searching for an opening or clue, though Virgil could see nothing that would help them. He forced even breaths in and out of his lungs, even as his heart began to race. Who first? Remus sang to himself, tapping his chin as his eyes grazed over the four sides before him. His gaze landed, and for a split second Virgil's heart stopped, but he soon realized the Duke's actual target was to his left, though the anxious side might have preferred himself instead. Happy Patton, Remus says slowly, face twisted with a grotesque excuse for a smile, as he leveled his gaze on the moral side. Patton gave a strangled noise in the back of his throat and tightened his grip on Logan's arm, prompting the logical side to tug him back, shielding him ever so slightly from Remus's deliberate stare. "Tell me, Patty Cake," the Duke continued regardless, swinging his feet in the air, "how would you go about a moral dilemma?" Patton just watched him with wide eyes and furrowed eyebrows for a moment. He opened his mouth, closed it, swallowed before answering hesitantly. "What do you mean?" Remus grinned. "I'm so glad you asked." In an instant, the wall of branches ripped apart with a sickening crack that reminded Virgil far too much of snapping bones, revealing a shroud of shadows the size of a cat, melding with the natural shadows of the forest so seamlessly that its details could hardly be distinguished, until it opened its eyes. All 8 of them. A strained noise that sounded like the deflated ghost of a scream escaped Patton's mouth as he stared at the tarantula ahead of them, his eyes wide and complexion ashen. "What fairy tale is this?" he spluttered. In all honesty, Virgil thought the spider was kind of cute. Fuzzy and golden-eyed, it reminded him vaguely of his own pet tarantula, though way bigger. Way bigger. Like the Addams Family version of a house cat. He suppressed the urge to go up and pet it, focusing instead on a clearly distressed Patton beside him. "Come on, Patton, you don't want to keep your new friend waiting," Remus said, waving for the moral side to step forward. Virgil fixed the Duke with a glare. "He's not going anywhere." "Oh, I'm quite sure he is, Virgil, unless you'd like to turn back now and avoid this altogether." Remus examined his nails with a nonchalant shrug. "I'm sure Roman wouldn't mind too much. He'll be glad to know you tried, I suppose, at least up until this point." Virgil had a few choice words ready to respond with, but Patton put a hand out, stopping him before he could begin. The anxious side glanced over to see a look of shaky determination on Patton's face as he stared at Remus and said, "It's okay, Virgil. I can do this." He started towards the middle of the path, towards the spider, but Logan grabbed his wrist before he got far. "We're right behind you," the logical side murmured, just loud enough for Patton to hear him. The moral side gave him a tiny smile and nodded, before tugging his hand away and turning back to the challenge before him. When he got to the center of the path, he called to Remus without taking his eyes off the tarantula. "What now?" Remus watched him in silence for a moment. His face was calm, adorned with something patronizing, something anticipatory, as if he enjoyed watching the moral side squirm. "Kill it." "What?" Patton gave a startled screech as a dagger appeared in his hand, nearly flinging it away as he jumped and turned his wide eyes upwards to look at Remus, his face colored in horror. "What?" "Kill it," Remus repeated with a shrug. "You hate spiders, don't you?" "Well, yes, but there is no but, Patton. Spiders are bad. You don't want Thomas to be tainted by bad things, do you? So kill it." Patton stared at the dagger, then the spider, then back again, wrist trembling enough that Virgil could see it from nearly 10 feet away. Remus tilted his head to the side. "What's wrong, Patton? Is it not that easy? Is it not black and white? Spider bad, Patton good?" Virgil felt a bolt of panic course through his chest as Patton sent a tearful glance over his shoulder. He wanted to help somehow, offer encouragement or something, but he was as clueless as the moral side. Remus offered no such sympathy as he stared down at Patton, all amusement on his face melted away, leaving something cold in his eyes, something dull and dogged. "Kill the spider, Patton." "I can't," Patton whispered. He glanced back again, but this time his eyes landed on Deceit, who watched the entire exchange with unreadable silence, and met the moral side's gaze evenly then. Patton swallowed, turning back to face the spider as he straightened his spine and gave a firm shake of his head. "I won't." Remus's expression didn't move. "It doesn't deserve it," Patton continued hesitantly, as if expecting the Duke to repeat his command yet again. Just because I don't like it, because it scares me, that doesn't mean it doesn't deserve a chance at life. I don't get to destroy every bad thing in Thomas's mind." He looked down and met the spider's eyes, clearly repressing a shudder as it stared back unblinkingly. "He has to see the bad so he can appreciate the good. Besides," he added quietly, voice still shaking slightly, though he took a daring, albeit slow step toward the tarantula, reaching a tentative hand towards it. "Sometimes something you think is bad at first does a lot of good in the end." He slowly lowered his hand, inch by inch, and petted the spider's head. Its eyes closed immediately, opening to a contented squint as Patton gave its hair a gentle stroke. The moral side let out a shocked, relieved laugh, tears still rolling down his face, though staunched, and he glanced back and grinned at Logan and Virgil, who gave him a proud smile and enthusiastic thumbs up, respectively. Then his eyes found Deceit, whose mouth was quirked into the tiniest smile that Patton hesitantly returned. How sweet. 4 pairs of eyes turned up to Remus. He looked bored more than anything, arms crossed over his chest as he leaned back against the trunk of the tree, eyebrows low and mouth set in a loose frown. He snapped and the smiter was gone from under Patton's hand. Congratulations, he said, voice flat, everything around him devoid of his usual shrill flair. You can continue, or whatever. And he was gone. Well, that was anticlimactic, Deceit scoffed, crossing his arms. Patton gave a shuddering sigh, making his way back to the group and asking hopefully, Did I do good? Virgil gave him a crooked smile. You did amazing, Pops. Truly, Logan agreed, mirroring the beam Patton gave him at the praise, though it was replaced with shock as the moral side wrapped him in a hug that he hesitantly returned after only a moment. Virgil watched the exchange with a smothered smile, but something nagged at him, a tugging in his chest. He looked out beyond the trees. He realized staring out there that they were heading into a valley now, where the forest seemed somehow denser, and to the tower in the distance, watching as the clouds quickly gathered thick around it, their inky color seeping into the gray sky around them. The thought of what rain could fall from the pitch-black sky brought a pit to his stomach. But skies were pale above them, so he pushed the thought from his mind and focused again on the domestic scene before him. He would keep his head as clear as possible until they were out of here. Remus defeated and Roman safe at his, their side. His thoughts flitted back to his and Deceit's truce, the feeling of leather in his callous palms and a security of a mutual goal. For Roman. Thank you all so much for listening. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe so you don't miss any of my future videos. And if you like what you hear and you want to read more, you can find the link to the fic in the description. See you next time!